Hi everyone, welcome to lesson 6.1. We're looking at Playmaker and I've now got it installed. So we're going to start off by learning how to collect and send data into an out Playmaker, and I'll explain why that's useful as we go. So this doesn't have any impact on the scene. You won't necessarily see anything to start with anyway. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create an empty, and Playmaker can live on anything. It doesn't have to be an empty. You could put it into another object. It creates a component just like any of the other components that you might see. And what we want to do, we want to create a Playmaker object inside there. The easiest way to do that is to, in Playmaker, open the Playmaker editor. And it opens up this lovely window that you'll get to love. Now this is where two screens is really useful. What I'm going to do is I'm going to dock it next to my game window here. So, it's a bit messy. Tell you what I'm going to do, I'm going to dock it down here. I'll make this a little bit larger. There we go, that's better. So now that I've done this, you shall see in a second that when I start to create something in my, what they call FSM, which is the state manager, you'll see a little symbol appear. So if I right click and add FSM, I've now got a little symbol, which also appears here in the GUI, and I've got a Playmaker GUI symbol. And actually if I click on here, I get some information about what, how Playmaker's working. Actually, it's something you really want to do is try and turn off the gizmos because they just get a bit annoying, but we'll leave them on for the moment. So how does this work? The idea is that if you are building an action, as soon as you hit play up here, that is start. Start will also appear if you've had this turned off, like one of these things just ticks off, and you tick it on in the game, it will create a start command, and then this will turn on. And whatever's in here, and we can add actions, so action browser, I could add, for instance, something simple, quit, application quit. I've now created a command that says quit, and it will just literally close the app. So in this case, if I hit play, it will literally start it and then close the app straight away, which we don't want. But that's literally what that's all about. If I right click and say add state, I create a second state, and I can join these together. So I can say this one's going to do something, it's going to make this one work. So I could put my application quit in here, and then I can send a command from one to the other. Now I've got to be honest, I'm not going to go into this in too much detail because we're doing this in the next lesson. We're going to talk about how to create keyboard commands, so I'm sort of in danger of moving ahead. But the point of Playmaker is about creating a flow of information. One thing it can also do, that I find really useful with the sort of data that we're using all the time, is it can hold information for you. So these are called gets and sets. So if I take my transform node up here from my game object, I can click and drag that into my action browser, and it asks me what do I want to do with it. I can do script controls, so call a method that might be written into the script, but there aren't any because you can't see any. We can set a property, or we can get a property. So I'm going to do a get first. I'm going to get a property, and I'm going to get this X position. The idea is I want to know where it is, and I'm going to save that as what we call a variable. So in my game object, I'm going to choose property. I'm going to choose local position. Now there's also position, and like with angles, you've got Euler angles, and you've got different types. We're not going to get into that now. It's just discover for yourself if you want. A vector 3 will save all three values as ones, x, y, and z, which is quite useful. But I'm just going to keep it simple for now. I'm just going to have just the x value, and I'm going to store it as a float. It's going to be a float value. A float is a number that I have like something to decimal points. So it's a large number. So we're going to create a new variable, and this we're going to call xpos. So now that's a float that we've created, and I'm going to say every frame. So every time that the computer ticks, it's going to update that value, no matter where it is. Okay, and that's it. I'm just going to turn on debug so it's easy to see what's going on. So it says 0, 0 at the moment because nothing's playing. So this code hasn't activated because, as I said, the start is when it turned on when you hit play. So that's a 0, 0. But when it turns on, it should give us this value. So let's hit play and see what happens. We should see, all our people start walking again and things. So there we are. Now we've got that value, 2.43, which is that. Now if I start moving this around in the scene in the X value, you'll see my number is updating. So I've taken the information from the X value and I've stored it as something's called a float. Now, what can I do with that? Now, I used a local float. We can see that in here in variables, there's my xpos. It's a float. Doesn't tell you float. So that exists. I can now apply that to something else. So let's create a set property. So I'm going to create another empty in here. In fact, I'm going to create a cube just so it's really obvious. And I'm going to stick it. I'll stick it a bit higher up so we can see it. And actually the X there is exactly the same as it was for my other one. So it's starting in the same place, which is quite handy. And now in this one, I'm going to create another FSM, add FSM. And in this state, I'm going to apply a set. So I'm going to click and drag my transform down to here. Set property. I'm going to choose, once again, the local position and the X. And this time, because I've already created a float and the variable, I can apply. I did something wrong because I'm building this in a new thing. So it doesn't. You can't see the float that I created in the other object because they're two separate objects. So I've got two things. I can either make my float visible to the entire game, which is useful, or I can send it to another object. And the way I'll do that is I don't build the FSM in the cube. I build it in the original object. So bear with me. I'm going to delete this FSM out. Pretend we didn't do that. I'm going to go into my game object and I'm going to lock this here, just like when I used the padlock up here in the top right earlier in the lessons. This is going to stay on now no matter what I click on. So I click on anything and that FSM stays there. If I go to my cube, my new cube, I'll click and drag the transform for the cube into the game object that's holding my FSM. Put it there and do set property. Okay, so this cube is now being called in this. So this game object is collecting its own position here and it will send it through set property to this cube. So if I go to property, local position, X, okay, and now it says set the value. Now I could type in something, I could type in 5, right? When I hit play, the X for this will just go to 5 and it will stay there. So that's a good way of setting scenes and things. But if I click on this little icon here, I get a drop down. I can choose any floats I've created that it can listen to, and xpos is in there. That's a float that I created. So hit xpos, you see it's a 0, 0. I'm going to choose every frame. So what that's going to do is that data from the position of my game object, which happens to be the one the float's connected to, is going to stream data into here. We saw it moving. It's going to save it in the xpos variable, which is here. It's used by 2 devices, you see. And then it's going to stream it out to this cube. You see if I click on it, it highlights where it's going to go. So it's sending it to this cube. So this cube should move in the X at the same time. So let's keep that open so we can see the debug. We'll hit play. So in theory, nothing should happen straight away. There we go. Now if I grab my game object, which is my Playmaker gizmo, as I move it, do you see that cube's moving with it? Cool, eh? So it's moving that object around. Now the reason this is useful is you might want to